Have you ever had the situation where things have been going okay, not terrible, kind of bobbing along, but something good is just around the corner, it's tangible, you can almost see it, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, it's there, bam, straight in your face, and then it's gone again, and you're there. What the hell just happened? I don't really know, but I liked it, and I want it again. I'm not talking about Leon Bailey's appearance from the bench on Saturday. I'm talking about Talk of the Trinity, the podcast that is here for you every week in terms of that Villa content that we are going to deliver, you hopefully going to enjoy, and then be back for some more. I'm Baz Barrett, with me is Will Forrest as always, and welcome to the latest instalment of Talk of the Trinity. You may be listening to this via our YouTube page. You may be treating yourself to our Spotify page. There may also be other podcast venues available to you where you're listening from this. We are currently in negotiations with the best and the worst streaming providers to get the Villa message out there. You may also be keeping up to date with the Twitter page at Talk Trinity, where all sorts of Villa content, but most of it serious, some of it nonsense, a bit like this podcast really. But something that certainly wasn't nonsense was the Villa performance on Saturday night at home to Everton. Villa 3, Everton 0. You predicted the win, Will. Did the match go the way you thought it was going to when we were talking about it in the preview last week?
Well, yeah, because I said we'd win. But no, in all seriousness, I thought we'd get 3 goals. But my thoughts were, it's Pickford in goal. He doesn't really do it for Everton. He does it for England. But we didn't have that problem. And when they put Begovic in, I'll be completely honest with you. Peter from Talking Toffees, who on our last episode gave us a little preview of this game. So if you haven't listened to that, there's a plug. Go back and get your ears around it. Anyway, he messaged me. He said, we've got a few more people out now. And I said to him, yeah, but you'll win 1-0 and Begovic will have a 9 out of 10 game. It'll be the greatest game he ever plays. His response being, my days, Everton and Villa are more alike than I realised. But I did, you're worried about Richarlison, you're worried about Damari Gray, you're worried that Andros Townsend's mom would send him even more videos of his absolute bangers. Calvert-Lewin we knew wasn't available. But Everton have got dangerous players. They're not bad from set pieces as well. I mean, England fans know that Yerry Mina likes to score from corners. So it was a lot more convincing than I thought it would be. But that performance, when you had the highs of the first half against Chelsea, you'd hope that they would get to that again. But my days, they delivered.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned on the preview, I didn't get to watch this game live. So it was a bit like, I think it was Steptoe and Son in the 70s, an episode where they're trying to avoid the football score. It was hard enough then. I mean, that was before the internet, and they're having 3-day weeks and blackouts kind of going on then. So I managed to sit down and watch it on Sunday evening, and as you mentioned, we saw the team for Everton. Talking Toffees, Peter had mentioned in attack they were lacking. With Richarlison out, that was even more apparent. In the first half, Begovic had a good game, great save from Mings kind of early on. But even though there were injury problems with Everton, and you look at it from the Villa perspective of if we had 4 or 5 players out, then how would we be playing? Even though there was that for Everton, even though we know Benitez is quite a defensive manager, really, and even though we knew they were going to sit back really and try and plough the break, I was quite surprised by Everton, really, and their lack of attacking ambition, which sounds a bit stupid when they have their 2 main strikers out, but it was very much let Villa come on to us and then we'll hit you on the break with Gray and Townsend. Maybe that was the only tactic they had, but there was something, it was a bit more obvious than what I thought, and to be fair, it nearly worked for them. I mean, in terms of the first half, I thought we were the better team. Obviously, we had the chance for Mings, but didn't create a huge amount apart from that. I think it was more the first half with players playing themselves into the system playing themselves into a bit of form because, we've mentioned Target struggling a little earlier on in the season. I thought he played well. Cash, he can be a bit up and down on occasion. I thought he played well. That was even before the events of the second half. So kind of feeling each other out. Bit of a boxing situation, really. Not going for the knockout early on. And turns out if you do need a knockout blow, 20-minute job, get Bailey on. Job done. And yeah, it was kind of a real bolt out of the blue even before. I mean, Bailey had come on and he'd shown a couple of nice touches before, but kind of that Cash moment, I mean, that was... What a finish, considering it was his first ever Premier League goal for Villa. You've got to wonder why it hasn't happened before, and also hopeful there might be a few more out of that locker.
Well, that's what Polish right-backs do for you, apparently, if the rumours and the news are anything to go by. But we've seen Matty Cash's guy in his locker before. I mean, he scored in that 5-5 draw with Forest. The last goal he scored prior to that was a belter against West Brom as well. Matty Cash, I love you even more after finding out that stat. It was a great goal. It was a great run, but it was a great team move as well. Those little triangular passes and the weight of through ball from Dougie Luiz, and then Cash to get round the wrong side of Digne and cut back in and hit it left-footed. I nearly jumped out my window. I was so ecstatic by it, let me tell you. It went potty. But it was a fantastic goal. It's one that he's deserved as well. I think this season there's been a few fans worried that Cash is being found out a little bit defensively because he obviously likes to attack, previously being a winger. But he did a good enough job. I mean, the whole defence did, really. When you consider that Everton had 11 shots and only one of those was on target, it's pretty remarkable. And switching to the other side, without talking about your boy Leon Bailey just yet, tell you who I did think was absolutely fantastic all game. Tyrone Mings, he dominated that left-hand side. He pushed forward, he covered for Target, he covered for Bailey, he covered for Young, whoever we wanted to bring onto that position, he covered for, and he was quite adventurous going forward. I think the thing with Mings, and we've said before our admiration for him, he leads by example, and he knows when he's made a mistake. He put his hands up from the Chelsea and he had a point to prove, and he proved it 100% in that game with a fantastic performance.
He even got to slot back into his old position at left back by the end. But yeah, impressive performance defensively. Another performance which really impressed me, actually, even though I suppose on the stat sheet not really springing out, was Jacob Ramsey. I thought he had a really good game as in terms of pressing from the front, trying to get on that attacking side of his game. I mean, his shot still needs a bit of work, but
should have passed.
There, you could see like the lights kind of shined in his eyes, and he was, going for the Holt End glory in front of the home fans. Close, not close enough. But yeah, I having seen a lot of younger players come through the Villa system in the last 10, maybe 15 years, really, and kind of thinking, have they really got a long-term future at Villa? Or to put it another way, if they left Villa, are they going to another Premier League club? Are they having like a real top-flight career? And I think you could look back, especially over the last decade, at a few, most, if not all, really, of the younger players who left. And at the time you thought, oh, maybe they could have got a chance. But no one has really kind of come out and gone, oh, God, what a massive, mistake, or going, how did we get rid of him? I mean, funnily enough, the last player who probably doesn't even fall under this category because he played over 100 games for us when he left, it's probably Albrighton. And you're there thinking, that's more because Leicester won the league rather than necessarily because anything Albright did at Leicester, but he's a solid player. But I'm looking at Ramsey, and if he carries on the way he's going, I think, he could be not necessarily, playing every single game for Villa, but I think he could get himself a nice little career, kind of really making an impact. If he sorts out his finishing, that will be the finishing touch.
Yeah, I thought JJ had a great game. I think he's played very well in every game, especially against Chelsea. He was one of our better performers before he went off. That goal will come, obviously, and when you mentioned that you think he'll have a Premier League career, I completely agree with you. I think him and his brother will feature in the Premier League together, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was before, I wouldn't say the end of this season, I think it'll be before the end of next season. If we have a cup game against maybe a Championship or League One side, I wouldn't be surprised if he threw them both in with, say, a Nakamba behind them to sweep up. And speaking of him, 100% pass success rate, marvellous Nakamba. Now, I'll be honest, I wondered why they brought him on. I appreciate they gave Dougie a bit more freedom to get forward, and he played really well in that 8 role, which I think we've always known he can do. It's just pinpointing his best position. But Nakamba deserves a lot of credit. He played very well. He allowed the wing-backs to get forward because of how he was holding his position. At times it felt like we'd gone 3-4-1-2 because of how he was protecting. But then again, whilst people and fans don't necessarily hold Nakamba in the highest regard, you remember back to last season when we played Arsenal at home, beaten 1-0, how fantastic he was there. We went quite a few games without the opposition scoring past us when he was on the pitch.
I think he's a really important part of the squad.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in terms of Louise obviously going a bit further forward into that number 8 role, when McGinn on the field playing a bit more defensive in that number 6 role. We don't have too many 6s, really, in that squad. And again, in terms of Nakamba, would you want him playing every week? Realistically, not if you're looking for Europe. I don't think it's quite at that level. But in terms of allowing other people to play and also allowing you to have that flexibility to move other players around the pitch who probably have more natural ability, let's be honest, in terms of Louise. I think that's a really important piece. And you look at it in terms of the alternative. If Nakamba wasn't in the squad, I'd struggle to see who else could just go in, do that role when required, come back out again, and seem relatively happy in the role. I mean, in terms of, I've never really heard too many rumours about him being unhappy, about not playing every week. Always seems to put in 100% effort, which, I suppose you could say is a minimum requirement of a footballer. But, he's seen many examples of players who aren't, first choice, kind of not really putting it all in their now and again appearances. But you don't really get that from Nakamba. He's a solid pro, appears to be happy at the club. And as you said, he has had games whereby he's really played an important role and did again Saturday, does his job quietly. I think you need that around the place. And unless we got somebody in who was, kind of the new Cloud Makalele kind of type player, then there's very few players realistically who are going to be able to come in and do that role. And I suppose, speaking of players who very few could do what they did, I suppose we've teased it. I suppose we can't really hold on to him much longer. I mean, Leon Bailey's that good. He only needs 20 minutes to do all what he needs to do. But certainly, I think for the first half, we're talking about playing ourselves into the game fairly even. Bailey coming on, replacing Target, really, kind of almost in that wing-back role, does demonstrate that difference in quality between a decent team and a team who could really kind of make a difference and really have a go kind of at European places when everybody's fit. Because you don't want to jinx the boy, but he looks like he's got it.
Well, it seems very much this season that we've got a dangerous team rather than last season we had a dangerous player who would then feed the ball to others when we had Grealish. Bailey's a danger man himself, isn't he? Again, on that left wing. And there won't be many right backs who can handle him when he's running at them full pace. I mean, Ben Godfrey's no slouch, is he? But even he didn't keep up with him for that last goal. Bailey, I think just the impact of the substitution, him even coming on, lifted the crowd anyway because they were so eager to see him after his cameo again against Watford. He just doesn't play full games, does he?
No. Also did well against Chelsea when he came on, I thought.
Exactly. Well, that lovely bit of skill where he megged Alonso and then carried on running, and that was as a cam or a right winger almost, rather than that sort of left wing back, left midfield, left wing role. I felt very sorry for him that they gave the second goal to Digne, because I really honestly felt like the ball was going straight in. I think most people thought he had done an Irish corner.
Yeah.
And that last goal, the way he managed to just nod the ball, hit it so true and so hard that he injured himself. And then he got the fans on his side straight away, really. He's everything you want in a winger. He's skillful, he's got pace, he's got confidence, he can pass the ball, he can cross the ball, he can score goals as well. If we can keep him fit, and if we can fit Buendia into the team as well, we've got a very good chance of top 8, I'd have thought. You know, those Evertons and whatnot around us. Spurs will be fighting. As much as we rib them, you'd expect Arsenal to be top half of the table, challenging for Europe, really, like top 8, 7-ish.
I suppose 10th is top half.
Yeah. West Ham have started well again. European expeditions haven't yet hampered them, but then again, it is only one game.
Yep.
Leeds haven't started very well at all. So, what is stopping us from going for top 8? Leicester, you look at them the other night at Napoli, 2-0 up, game in the bag, threw it away, 2-2. So if we can keep everyone fit and we can find our right team and the right formation, and for me, the right formation has to have Watkins and Ings up front together, then we shouldn't be scared of anyone. Last season, we weren't scared of any team. We lost Grealish. We were a little bit worried about what the new signings would bring and how we'd respond. But it feels like we've got that swagger still, but it's a different kind, and it's not just one Liam Gallagher at the front of the stage swaggering. You got Freddie Mercury, you got John Lennon, you got Elvis as well, and they're all coming for you.
Now, I suppose talking about the front men, and you mentioned them there, I suppose leading on quite nicely. Ings and Watkins playing together. How did you see that pan out on the field, and do you think that moving forward, playing them two up front is the right way to go?
I do. I think you have two up front. It's a lot more effective than having one up front. Yeah, I very much expect United to play a 4-2-3-1 against us, and Kate's arguably the best player in the world who will be up front for them. But when you've got 3 defenders marking 1 as opposed to 3 defenders marking 2, it's always going to be more of a handful. And with the thing that, I mean, I've been loving Danny Ings since we signed him. But I think that's because I never really appreciated what a good player he is and what he does off the ball. There's a lot of pressing. He did the most presses against Chelsea, I think it was, a couple of weeks ago. That assist for the goal that Bailey scored, if that's Kevin De Bruyne playing that pass, I guarantee Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer and Ian Wright are talking about it for 10 minutes on Match of the Day. It was a superb through ball, and then as Bailey scores, Ings is in the box. I mean, he's not the quickest, but he's busting a gut to get forward. And it's finally that we've got that striker in the Premier League again who you feel if you give him the ball in the box, he's going to hit the target, he's probably going to score. No offence to Watkins. Watkins is great as well, and he needs a goal this season, you know, to really settle him down. But I only see good things coming of it. It might take another month or two to really see them firing on all cylinders. And as daft as this might sound, I think it'll be the best duo since, and we probably haven't had a duo since then, Angel and Vassell. They were quality together, very underrated, scored double figures each. I think that they'll be the same, and if they don't get 12 to 15 goals each this season, I'd be very surprised.
think that outside of the boot effort from Ings in the first half, if that would have gone in, they would have had to have dedicated the whole match of the day to Danny Ings. I think in terms of Ings individually, all those great things he's been doing, and one of our best performers over the course of the season.
Yeah.
My slight concern at this stage is, in conjunction with Watkins, that partnership doesn't quite seem to be flowing in terms of, you want Ings in the box, you want him at the end of chances. There's a slight element of, kind of feels of Watkins there. He needs to go a bit further out. And if he's banging him into Bailey, then no worries there. But I think they're just both going to have to feel their way into the role of who's going to be going forward. As they got two up front, but one of them is always going to have to be the vocal one, kind of the focal and the vocal one at any time, and one may have to kind of drop wide. I think kind of just working out each other's game really, and in terms of when it's best for one to go, because Watkins, we were saying previously, he's the one who's like pressing from the front, and now we've got Ings doing it. So it's kind of, I think, kind of getting them on the same wavelength. I mean, I'm not worried in terms of thinking, oh God, neither of these players are any good, or kind of, it's never going to work. It's just getting that system, getting them on the same wavelength, getting them both fit, I think, at the same time. It's a nice problem to have, I think, in terms of mentioning the players who weren't even on the pitch. Bundea didn't play, as you mentioned. McGinn went off. We'll mention the injuries, I think, when we come on to the preview. But, yeah, I mean, a real kind of positive day, a real kind of deflating day if you're an Everton fan. I mean, demonstrating, as Peter Talking Toffee said, the squad depth isn't quite there at Everton. It made me look at our squad depth and go, we're a bit further along in the journey. Yeah. It's like we're looking decent. I mean, there's still places to go. I still think, there's a few places in the squad that we could do with strengthening and for numbers and quality. But
definitely,
there was talk before the game. Obviously, Everton, I think they had a mathematical chance of going top if they would have beaten us by a sufficient score. And I think the fact we were able to lay down a marker, I don't know what quite the marker is signifying yet in terms of, is that Europe, is that just kind of everything's going to be okay without the name we don't mention. But yeah, considering there was a lot of positive talk about Everton, Benitez before the game, even with their injuries, I thought it was a real positive performance. I mean, the result, you win 3-0, so you think, oh, of course it must have been, as we were talking about with Chelsea last week, they were lucky to win 3-0. Yeah. We weren't. We kind of having that period whereby, for 70 minutes, fairly even game, really. I mean, they had chances. I thought Tamara Gray played really well, actually. I don't think I'm allowed to say that. But 20 minutes, assassination job, really. It was just like bang. And we haven't had that very often, especially in the last, kind of few years of our previous Premier League era. So, yeah, really positive, really. And that positivity, hopefully, can go on for the next few games we've got coming up, which this time of the season, the games will be coming thick and fast. So I suppose that leads us on quite nicely to Chelsea in the League Cup. Wednesday night, Stamford Bridge. We've mentioned in terms of the team who were playing against Everton, what type of team do you see us putting out on Wednesday? Same team, reserves, youngsters, bit of both?
Do you know, I've seen a few bits on Twitter from fans saying what they do, and I put a vote out on there saying, would you want a full strength team, a mixture, or youngsters? And it was a mixture that came back for me, and it was a tweet that stood out to me from a Villa fan. And if it was you, fair play, because you've hit the nail on the head. If we want to win this thing, we've got to play our best team, and we've got a good enough squad now. I mean, you mentioned there about the squad depth. There aren't many positions, really now, being completely honest, where we really need to strengthen. We probably need one player for each sort of defence, midfield, attack, goalkeeper. 4 players away, so a transfer window in the summer away, from having a team that could be pushing even more. But that all depends on the formation we play, because if we play 3-5-2, we probably only need to add a defender and a striker. I think going into this match, we'll see some of the fringe players playing, but I think we'll be surprised by how many of the first team players play as well. It's going to be the formation. Do they go 3-5-2 again, or do they go 4-4-2? If I'm Dino, you've got to try and keep momentum.
Or do you go 4-2-3-1? And I suppose that's the advantage of the players we've got, that we can mix it up. In terms of the team we'd put out, whether we go full strength, it's a tricky one, because you always want to win trophies, obviously. But I think we've mentioned in terms of trying to get players fit and trying to get confidence and trying to get, kind of everybody up to speed on the same system, especially when the system hasn't always been the same in terms of the formation. So talking about players who weren't playing on Saturday, like Buendia, Traore comes on off the bench. Sanson doesn't play. Young comes off the bench. I would probably use it to get the squad players a bit of match practice. And you're not going to get better practice than away at Chelsea. I think Chelsea, I don't think they'll play full strength, but I think their team is going to be more than good enough to give most people a game. In terms of, technically, if a reserve is somebody who isn't in your starting 11 or your first choice, you've got El Ghazi playing, and he underrated, I think, or underappreciated, I think, is kind of the opinion we've kind of expressed of El Ghazi. You got Buendia, who arguably didn't play on Saturday. Is he first choice now? After kind of go away for a couple of weeks and things move on. So I think we could play what would probably be a reserve or largely reserve team, but still a strong team, not in we're going to get beat type team, kind of play the kids. To be honest, in terms of playing players who are first choice, I'll play Watkins. I'll play him up front. Try, maybe, if we're playing 4-2-3-1, him on his own up front, just try get him some confidence, even though is he going to be playing up front with Ings in the Premier League more often than not? Probably. But, just to get him in the box, get him, on the end of some chances, do him the world of good, I think. Of course, it's easier said than done against a Chelsea team. But, like Courtney Howe's, get him a game, in terms of, obviously, he's not first choice. I think we could put a pretty decent team out, and I'd look at it and go, wow, that's not even first choice. In terms of talking about going back into historical Villa teams, it's been a long time, I think, since you've been able to pick a team for a cup game away at Chelsea, which is a reserve team, really thinking about most of the players who are going to play, and go, I actually think we've got a chance here.
O'Neill days. It would be, wouldn't it, going back to then with the players that we had. I think we go 3-5-2 again, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Watkins played, though. With his recent injury, it probably won't be for the whole game, and he's likely to start and feature against United. Courtney Howe's will be playing on Saturday, I would have thought, with Twanzebe being unavailable to play. Yep. For me, I'll go with that 3-5-2. I've got one eye on Man United, and I've got my other eye on winning the cup. Man United, you'd expect them to have quick wingers, because that's what they do. Ronaldo up front, Bruno Fernandes at cam, Pogba and whoever they're playing alongside him, putting the strings in centre mid. So with that in mind, their quick right winger, no offence to him, do you want Matty Targett playing there? Because he struggles against the quicker players. So Targett for me starts against Chelsea because of that, if he's fit enough. And Young starts against Man United because Young is one of the top 5 fittest players in the Villa squad, and I don't mean just how dashingly good looking he is. So he's there. You've mentioned El Ghazi, but does El Ghazi start up front?
Possibly.
It's a different option.
I mean, I think in terms of if you give an Ings a rest, then perhaps, I do have to put El Ghazi up front, because mentioned in terms of injuries, players out, Target might not be fit, Davis probably not fit.
Cameron Archer.
I mean, I think he's going to be on the bench. I mean, you could see him being thrown in there, potential opportunity. We've got McGinn potentially not fit. There was a little niggle with Cash, actually, so maybe he might not be risked. So it might be through circumstance and a little bit of choice, kind of a little bit of the two. But I mean, in terms of the league game, obviously I wasn't massively optimistic going into the game, and I think we played a lot better. A bit more optimistic about this one. If we're going to go in terms of outcome, score prediction, how do you see this one going?
We win on penalties, for me. I don't think we win in normal time. Our voters, whether they're all followers on our Twitter page, have said that they think a Villa win. 62% have said a Villa win in normal time. 20% Villa on penalties. 15% Chelsea. 3% Chelsea on penalties. For me, and I'm gonna think about the team. Chelsea, okay, they'll probably have Saul playing in the middle again. I can't see Kante may play because he hasn't played too much recently. He scored at the weekend.
Yep, played well.
Timo Werner will probably start, I'd imagine.
Yep.
Kepa will be in goal for them. James, because of his recent suspension, may be a bit fitter than he was. I can't remember whether they've got Emerson anymore, if I'm completely honest with you.
I think he might have gone at the end of the transfer window.
They just leave a left back and then don't play anybody.
Funnily enough, in terms of left back now struggling to get a game at Chelsea, Chilwell.
Well, Chilwell. They've obviously got a very strong team and they need to be respected again. Loftus-Cheek, if he didn't get a loan move out, I don't care about Chelsea, to be honest with you, so I don't know who's there or not. Scott Parker could still be in midfield for all I care. Yep. For me, though, I think you can put Steer or Martinez in goal, and either one of them is going to save a penalty in the shootout. I'd have Mings, Konsa and Bogard in defence. Konsa and Mings are very high on Bogard, and they've took him under their wing. They've introduced him to the squad to get him used to the first team squad. And if we don't get Twanzebe at the end of the season, I see Bogard being around the matchday squad next year on the bench or in the team. Target left wing, if you like. It'll be El Ghazi or Traore on the right. Central midfield pairing of Nakamba, Sanson and Buendia just in front, bit of a free roll.
Yep.
And then it'll be Traore or El Ghazi up front with Watkins. That's how I see. And that's unfair on Philogene Bidace, who's back from injury, and Carney Chukwuemeka, who's also back from injury. They'll be on the bench. They'll probably get a good run out as well.
Yep.
But no, penalties for me. Do you think it'll get that far?
If it goes to penalties, we've got a cracking record, haven't we?
Won our last 6, haven't we?
It is, kind of, I suppose, a testament we don't get many penalty shootouts. But, in terms of, we have had a few real high presser situations in the penalties, shall we say. Unfortunately, Kepa, he's, when he's refusing to kind of go on or go off in terms of when he is actually between the sticks for a penalty shootout, he's got a decent record. I think Chelsea will win 2-1, but I think it's going to be a close game. I think, you mentioned in terms of that starting 11 there, I think that's, in terms of progress, that's a much better starting 11 than we had when we were promoted.
Yeah.
And it's not first choice now, which I think, harks back to in terms of what we've been saying regularly in terms of you've got to see it in terms of, 3-5 year plan in terms of progression. Demonstrates we're on the right track. Obviously, be more than happy to be proved wrong. I can see it being a tight game. I don't think it's going to be 3-0 Chelsea again. And, hopefully for those fans making the trip down, it'll be a worthwhile night out in the West think it's the west side of London. I think kind of
yeah,
part of the world. So yeah, I mean it's good air of optimism, I'd say. So don't blame me when it's 5-0 Chelsea, but I don't think it will. And in terms of that, will hopefully not have too much of an impact if it is not the result we want in terms of Saturday's game. But we will talk more about Saturday's game later on in the podcast. Moving on then, and moving backwards from current affairs, back to the latest in our instalment of our Villa Ultimate 11. If you've been listening to the podcast over the last few weeks, we've been delving the archives from 1992 up until the present day, going back past the 3 decades, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it indifferent, and we've been picking our Ultimate 11 in a 4-4-2 formation, which we may or may not be playing against Chelsea or against Man United. But, we've picked our goalie, we've got the back four sorted. Last week we picked our 2 central midfielders. And so this week we're going to be focusing on right midfield. And the way we're going to do it, we're going to split the coming up to 30 years since football began in 1992 into 3 decades of 10. So from 92-93 season to 2001-2002, we're going to be having our pick of the best right midfielder from that particular decade. Then we're going to be doing the same from 2002-2003 up until 2011-2012. And then we're going to be doing the same from 2012-2013 until the present day. Don't really have too many rules for this, some of which we'll be making up as we go along, but only hard and fast rule really is loan players don't count, although they get an honourable mention. And something that has come up in the last few episodes is you only get 1 shot at making the team. So that is going to come into play in today's episode, because one of the players, no doubt, we'll be talking about, we had to have a conversation about what his appropriate place was in the team. It's a very competitive environment, the dressing room of the Baz Will Ultimate 11. So, there's no room for, kind of repeat offenders here. So we've been putting on the Twitter page our team, the fans' team. Funny enough, in terms of the Baz and Will team, we've been largely on the same page, kind of for most of it.
Yeah.
The fans have had a few differences along the way, but it'll be interesting to see whether there's more harmony in the team selection this week or whether there's further disagreement amongst the ranks.
Well, yeah, we've had one difference of opinion, and it wasn't even that big of a difference of opinion really, and that was the Staunton Samuel. And the Twitter fans went with Staunton, and to be honest, I don't blame them really. He was very good in that first period for us, a very dependable left back. The fans have largely agreed with us, except for Martinez over Bosnich. Yeah, some nice interactions with fans as well about the centre midfield. Them saying Petrov should have got in there over one of Taylor or Barry, but understanding why Taylor and Barry got in as well. I mean, when you think of the likes of Paul Merson, didn't get into that team, but was, for wanting of a better expression, there or thereabouts. Yep. Really, and there are a lot of other good players who you feel that if they'd have just stuck around a bit longer, maybe they could really have been considered. John McKean was also a name that was very close to getting into that team, and I'm sure that if we did this again and revisited it in a couple of years' time, Guinea would have an even better shout of getting into that midfield too. At least you hope he would.
Well, yeah, hopefully he's still here in a few years, and with images of him running around Wembley, lifting a couple of trophies.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
For ones that we've won, not these Knicks, kind of after a losing final.
Well, he has done it, hasn't he? He scored the winner against Derby, to be fair. Just let him do it again.
He did, yeah. Now he's got a taste for it. And I suppose now we've got a taste for picking our Ultimate 11 and the rules, and we know what's coming. So we should delve right in to right midfield for the first decade, starting in 92-93 up until 2001-2002. It was a little bit of a struggle finding a list of names for this decade, largely because for most of the decade we didn't actually play a right midfielder because we played 3 centre midfielders and we covered most of them in the last episode. But I think realistically I would say there's one standout candidate really for the right midfield role who I'm going to throw out there, and he's already been mentioned in a few episodes previously, mainly from our Irish contingent, because I think you're going straight out the bat for a player who was there first game of Villa in the Premier League away at Ipswich. Come throw in Ray Houghton.
Ray Houghton, yeah. I remember bits of him, more so when looking back when we won the League Cup the first time in the 90s. Iconic number 7 shirt there as well for Ray, and he scored a lot of important goals. Obviously a big signing coming from Liverpool as well, did very well for Ireland and represented them. I can see why you'd throw him in. I would, though, counter that with Steve Stone, and you mentioned him before we started recording the podcast, and my first reaction was when he played right wing back mainly, which he pretty much did. He was more of a right winger for Nottingham Forest. 4 seasons at the Villa, some tantalising crosses that would have been converted by strikers. I remember him mainly because he looked a bit like a turtle in that claret and blue striped FA Cup final shirt.
Yep. And
he scored a penalty when we beat Bolton.
Yep. And also, his claim to fame in the original Lightning Seeds Badul and Skinner video for Football's Coming Home, he plays the role of Nobby Stiles in a bit at the end, lifting the World Cup in the recreation, mainly because I think they were struggling to get England players to join the video shoot. But my comment off air to you when you talk about Steve Stone was I've never been so pleased to see Steve Stone, because there wasn't really too many kind of right midfielders. And you've got those goals. I mean, you've got Houghton, a few great goals against Inter Milan, gets mentioned a lot. Funny enough, in terms of the League Cup, I didn't remember he didn't play in the final. Like, he wasn't in the starting 11. There was a bit of a tactical surprise when Graham Fenton came on and did a really good job, actually. He played really well that day. But yeah, Houghton very much kind of that Ron Atkinson, kind of that early team, real kind of, most of the players you could name straight off the tongue, really, and he's certainly one of them. Liverpool, you mentioned, won a few trophies there, to be fair, and, kind of was a real big signing for us kind of at the time. Liverpool were going through a bit of a trying to change the guard, perhaps probably a bit too soon, really, on, reflection of how things went for Liverpool in the early Premier League years. If you're really trying to strangle it out for a third choice, even though he really played left midfield most of the time, Alan Thompson played right midfield, I suppose, a few times.
Ooh. Yeah, no.
But yeah, I think there's going to be a few names that I'm throwing in there trying to shoehorn that right midfield, and it's not happening. But
I liked Alan Thompson when he joined. I remember 2 million signing from Bolton. It seemed like a good signing, maybe not one that you'd run to the shop to get the mail to read all about it, really. But it was still he can hit a ball, can't he? And he scored 1 or 2 free kicks for us. Apart from Alan Thompson, people who actually played on the right midfield, someone who should have done a lot better than he did, and did have that excitement around him, mainly because he bagged 2 goals against us on the last day of the season before, Mustafa Hadji. He had all the skills, scored goals, probably played a bit more of an advanced role for Coventry, really, playing more up front to sort of to get the goals for them. Stephen Cook was someone who people really thought was going to be the next big thing, and he never did it for us. I remember him playing 1 game and I left early. He weren't great. And Scott Murray, who ended up at Bristol City as maybe a right back or a car park attendant.
Yeah, I mean, he had a decent pro career, kind of, well, because he actually played kind of after he left Villa. But yeah, there were kind of a few players, mid-late 90s, youth players, who kind of bobbed around the squad. You thought they might do a bit more. Yeah. Didn't really do much. mainly because we had quite a decent team probably back in the day, kind of there as well, cup final team and all that. But yeah, I think we're scrambling around for right midfielders. I think for the 90s, early 2000s, I think it's a straight choice between Houghton and Stone, and I'd probably go Ray Houghton.
I'm happy to go with Ray Houghton. I mean, for the fact that he was in that squad that won the cup. He was a key player, more so than Stone was. And Stone really was right wing back quite a bit. So yeah, I'm more than happy to go with Ray Houghton for that one.
Moving on then to 2002-2003 season, 2011-2012. By comparison, this was a glut kind of a right midfielders. I think we've got more than two, perhaps not many more than two, but we've already kind of teased who we might be trying to shoehorn in at right midfield, because we went with the decision not to include him in centre midfield. Is that person your choice for this decade, right midfield, or have you got somebody else for us?
I think there's a couple of players that could be considered apart from that gentleman, but I am going to go for him, Mr. James Milner. James Milner. And people on Twitter, again, have said to me he was a centre mid. That's what I remember him for. That's where he had his best season. James Milner had a cracking 36-game season in centre midfield for us, and then one game against West Ham where he scored, got took off, clapped us and said goodbye, before going and having a very good career at Man City and moving on to Liverpool and doing very well there. But his first permanent season for us, he played 36 games on the right midfield. He was athletic getting down that right wing. I'm pretty sure he made his debut in the 8-3 cup win against Wickham. Scored his first goal in a 2-1 away win against Sunderland. He liked scoring up at Sunderland for us. That iconic goal, probably when he was in centre midfield and we won 1-0. And that season he had on loan. He played on the right midfield for us, and I know we said we're not considering loan players, but he was a permanent player as well. So we can factor in those loan appearances. He just gave an energy to that wing, didn't he? And he was an exciting signing. He was somebody that we wanted. We were very disappointed when we didn't get to sign him because Newcastle changed the deal at the last minute for us. But you got him on the ball and you saw him in the team with the likes of Barry, Young, Petrov, Ryakoka, later Downing, and with the strike forces that he had, and you felt that Milner was a game changer. Scored some great goals for us. Scored some important goals as well. The penalty against United in the final where we lost. The goal to get us to that final when we beat Blackburn away, 1-0. I remember you going to that and saying about how the away fans went mental for it.
Yep, great atmosphere there that day.
Scored a great lob against Hull from a quick thinking throw-in when Steve Sidwell played it to someone to throw it in. He lobbed the keeper.
Probably his best assist, Steve Sidwell.
But Milner was a top class player, and I think you can also tell a top class player by how disappointed the fans are when they go. Okay, he came out while he was on England duty and said that he needed to leave to play Champions League football, and that hasn't gone down so well for Grealish at the moment, and him leave it, even though he didn't actually come out and say that. But like with Gareth Barry, all has been forgiven. He was a great servant to the club. So for me, James Milner would take that right midfield role.
I'd say in terms of Milner and the debate between centre midfield and right mid, I probably do remember him the most for playing centre midfield. Would he have got a move to Chelsea, or even who he ended up actually moving to, Man City, if he would have carried on playing right midfield? Probably not, is my thought. But he did, as you said, he came in on loan, quite an exciting prospect, as he said, played pretty much a full season, then, played right midfield that first season as a permanent player. And also the advantage of us being able to make the rules is that we were able to put him in right midfield. And I suppose we got that debate, and we've had that debate, and probably will continue to have the debate about, is he right midfield, is he centre midfield? Have we got any other candidates who we can say are right midfield who may be able to knock him off that right midfield spot for this decade?
We've got at least two, haven't we, really? Let's be honest. You've got the man who went in the opposite direction when Milner came back, Nobby Solano. He wasn't with us for very long, and he was desperate to get back to Newcastle in the end, but he played very well for us. He's probably not in the greatest Villa team of the Premier League era.
Great value though, like $1.5 million.
Remember his goal against Tottenham, where he had his back to goal, flicked the ball up with the bottom of his foot and did an overhead kick and scored, and people are like, wow. He linked up, I remember, and you'll smirk at this, but that right-hand side at the time was very South American. Ulysses de la Cruz, I know we joke about him, Solano and Angel, and they did all right together, especially Solano and Angel.
Yeah, they did all right together. I'll get them too. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Solano, good value signing. Came in halfway through the O'Leary season, so really was a bit of impetus towards our 6th place finish in the end. As you mentioned, it was unfortunate that the remainder of his time at Villa really was in a team that was gradually getting worse. And then, you can tell how bad it was. He wanted to, go back up north and as far away from what was going on as possible. But I'd say realistically, he's a strong candidate. Again, in terms of we may be moving on towards players who might be trying to shoehorn into positions. Counting Mark Albrighton, right midfield?
I would count Mark Albrighton as right midfield. Maybe he falls a bit more into the next decade. I don't know. He probably played more games towards the end of his career. I'm sure that you'll have the stats for that. But while we're considering him, I'm going to give you two players who I know that you won't pick for right midfield for us, and people may even forget that they played for us. Wayne Routledge played all of about one game for us before going to Swansea and actually doing quite well at Swansea. And then moving on to Newcastle, as we found out when we spoke to Will at Talk of the Tune. And also Didier Agath, who joined us at the same time as Chris Sutton, played probably 3 games for us. It was that Celtic connection again with O'Neill. But yeah, I mean, Mark Albrighton, which side of the line does he fall on?
We'll look in terms of the stats for Albrighton. Premier League debut 2009-2010.
Yeah.
Plays 3 games. 2010-2011 plays 29 in the league, 5 goals. That's the most he plays in a season for Villa. May include sub appearances as well. 2011-2012, which is the cut-off point for this decade, plays 26 in the league, scores 2. Following season, 2012-2013 plays 9, and then 2013-2014 plays 19. So on the numbers, I think he does fall into this decade.
56, 58, isn't it, on this first period? And then on the next period, it's 28 games?
Yeah, and you got, a few cup games as well. Funny enough, in terms of Albrighton, I think in terms of, was it the 10,000 Premier League goal? I think he scored against Arsenal. I think that falls into the 2011-2012 perhaps. I think that's, that was because he didn't score in the league after that. So I think that was 2011-2012. So I think for that alone probably falls into this decade. A real kind of shame, really. I mean, in terms of different stories about why he left. Some people have said it's because he wanted too much money. Others have said it's because we just didn't offer him a new deal. He plays every single game, or is involved in every single game in a season that Leicester win the league. So I suppose in terms of, he's probably thinking he worked out all right for him. Unfortunately, winning the league for Leicester doesn't get him consideration in terms of getting into our ultimate 11. I think you really then kind of, for other right midfielders, trying to grab people in. Sean Maloney, maybe count him as a right midfielder. Struggling.
I'd have put him more as a left midfielder or a centre forward. He scored some great goals as well. It's a shame that he got homesick.
Yep.
Because he was a good little player for us, better than Agath and
slightly.
Yeah. But going back to Mark Albright, just really quickly, and a question for you: if we had managed to lure him back, he'd be. It's not really a question actually. I suppose so. He'd be quite a decent squad player for us now, wouldn't he? You know, with that 3-5-2 or even with a 4-2-3-1, you can imagine him and Matty Cash or him and Bertie El Ghazi linking up with each other. He'd be a decent sign. Was he about 31, 32 maybe?
31. Currently turning 32 in November, which is, it's a lot older than what you'd expect, really. I think just because he broke through, obviously, Villa as a youngster. In terms of, if he's coming in on a free transfer, a bit like an Ashley Young situation, it's not the worst deal in the world. I mean, in terms of, is he going to be first choice? No, I don't think so. But, you know, if somebody's saying, free transfer, this time around I'll take a lower wage, honest, then yeah, I mean, you could have worse options. I mean, I wouldn't really want to sign him for any more than a 1 or 2 year deal, just because I think you'd hope by that stage that some of the younger players we've got in the academy will be ready. But
True.
In terms of, as you mentioned, he's won the league. You know, he's got experience playing Champions League, high levels of European football, really, and I suppose that is going to be experience, you know, to pass on. I mean, not probably as extensive as Ashley Young, but you know, it's still important, and he's still trying to get that balance of trying to create a winning culture. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be running up and down the streets in delight if we had him, but free transfer, low wage, I wouldn't be, you know, too disappointed, which I suppose is why he's probably still at Leicester, in terms of probably the terms probably couldn't be agreed, you know, in terms of getting it back. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It'd be nice to have a redemption story. I mean, I think, you know, comparing him to Young, when Ashley Young left, he had a lot more vitriol kind of his way. Now he's come back and seen, you know, kind of 10 years as all is forgiven, you know, kind of as it were. So in that sense, it'd be nice to have him back. But, you know, I mean, I think it's testament to where Villa are currently, that it's not quite as pressing a need as it would have been a couple of years ago when we got promoted.
Definitely. It's testament to us, and I think it's also a testament to him that we'd consider saying, yeah, actually, if the terms were right, you would have him back. I mean, there's other players around that time. Barry Bannon, I don't think you'd have him back as good as a player as he could have been. Championship, maybe you would have, but now Premier League, no. There were a lot of midfielders from that period, I think, who you would have taken back towards this sort of age in their career, maybe a little bit older, to add to the squad. But I mean, Mark Brighton's there for consideration. I think Solano and obviously Milner, unless you've got anyone else you're trying to shoehorn into that right midfield.
I suppose in real desperation, I mean, we mentioned Mark Kinsella, Stuart Downing trying to masquerade his way from the left wing. He might have come on for 5 minutes playing on the right, but no.
Mark Kinsella was a centre midfielder, wasn't he? Do you know what? Stuart Downing, I actually think, played a few games on the right when Young was in the team on the left. I'm pretty sure we did, actually. His debut, because he was injured, wasn't he, when we got him?
Yep.
And he made his debut against Portsmouth, and we beat them 4-2 in the Cup, and he scored. And I'm pretty sure it was a right-footed goal from close range. But he played on the right quite a bit until they moved him over onto the left-hand side before he became an absolute twat and decided to leave after we'd done all that for him.
Yeah.
He's too much of a dickhead for me.
Didn't quite work out for him, did it? His career. It promised, when he went to Liverpool, could have been a lot more. Just didn't happen for him. And, you know, in terms of, well, obviously sticking around at Villa wouldn't have been the greatest, you know, in terms of where the club was going. But yeah, I don't think he'd be getting a welcome back anytime soon. But Milner's decade, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Nobody. Solana and Albrighton, fair play. You know, Albrighton surprised me. I thought he would have played more towards the end, but obviously he didn't. It was that Houllier season that really brought him to prominence. The goal against United when we drew 2-2, when we went 2-0 up as customary. Hopefully that doesn't happen at the weekend.
Yep.
Solana, he wasn't around long enough. It's got to be Jimmy Milner.
Yep, so we've got Houghton, Milner, and then moving on to the final decade, really. There's a few more choices, actually, coming into the modern day, which is maybe a slight difference from some of the other positions we've looked at. There's going to be a few more I'm going to try and shoehorn in here. We probably didn't play on the right wing, really, just to see if you're paying attention. But in terms of right midfield for the last decade or so, who's top of your list?
Oh, do you know what? It's a choice between two for me, actually. So I'm gonna let you go first. I mean, you might try and shoehorn Alan Wright in because of his surname.
Yep.
But
I think that's a good choice.
I'll let you go first. I've gone first on the last one. It's only fair.
There's a lot of names. Most of them probably aren't worthy of consideration, but I think in terms of the two, really, I think I'm kind of similar. I think El Ghazi has to be one.
Okay.
I think for the last decade. And this, the amount of people, I'm just throwing in left midfielders. I'm pretty sure this guy played right midfield, at least for a few games. Albert Adoma?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, El Ghazi for me, I toyed with him as a right midfielder, but I actually went and put him left. I know he played probably a lot more on the right, but he's played on the left a bit more recently, and he was on the left wing when he scored the cup final goal against Derby, though I think there's an argument for both. Trezeguet, I actually thought more right, only because he tended to score more goals in that purple patch when he was on the right, though he was on the left when he scored against Leicester, so those two were doing me nothing. Albert Adoma's a great shout. 4 seasons, or 3 or 4 seasons he was with us, scored penalties, scored a lot of goals, he was a lovable character. When we signed him, I think we probably thought, and we're getting rid of Adama Traore for him, who's ironically right midfielder, not shoehorning him in. Wouldn't have played him on the right of midfield, I'd have put him up front and just said to him, keep running through, you'll score one eventually.
Probably Sherwood's tactic, if he would have stuck around.
Apart from those, so yeah, my other one, and this I think is testament to him for how long he's been at the club, Bertrand Traore. Now, I appreciate fully he won't get in because he's not been around long enough, but he, out of all the midfielders we've spoken about, has got a better goals per game ratio. He scores 1 in every 5 games, scored some beauties last season, the goal away at West Brom. Anybody who scores against West Brom, I'm going to love. And the Chelsea one.
So to be honest, we could have a feature which you'd probably quite enjoy of Villa team who scored against West Brom 11. And I think that would probably be about, a 3-hour special.
Mate, too right.
Putting out for the fans. Traore, I agree, especially the second half of last season, really kind of stepped up to the plate and, scored some great goals and really contributed. It's not an issue. I think it's, again, testament of where Villa are going and how far they've come. We touched upon it in the Everton review, Chelsea preview. I don't think he's first choice anymore. I think things have moved on potentially that quick, and I'd probably still give him the benefit of the doubt over El Ghazi, but you can see kind of, especially if we kind of play, you can call it 5-3-2 or 3 at the back, in terms of if you go more central midfielders and a winger, wing back in cash, it's an Irish struggle to see how he's going to be playing every week, but certainly I think if he was playing as well as he has been doing second half of last season, moving forward to the next few years, then I think in terms of when we signed him, there was a little bit of, I'm not sure about this, but I think he's proved a lot of people wrong.
Yeah, I can see him being considered as a striker. He pops up at the right time, he's quite good in the air, He's a quick player. Hopefully he doesn't lose a yard of pace due to his injury that he suffered against Liverpool. But Trezeguet has got the makings of being still an important squad player for us.
Yep.
I think apart from those ones that we've mentioned, you look at the right midfielders, or a lot of the time it's more right wing, wasn't it? Let's be honest, with the formations we were playing.
Yep.
A player who we probably wanted to see a lot more of after his debut against Bournemouth in the FA Cup, Carlos Hill.
Yep.
Scored that great goal against them, scored a fantastic goal against Leicester as well, and then disappeared, and he's now captaining someone somewhere and doing quite well. Is he in the MLS now, or is he still in Spain?
Yeah, I think he very, very well be. Fell out of Remy Gard, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which is, considering what the hell was going on at that time, I mean, certainly could have done with him. Yeah, I think he was, unfortunately, one of the players who were probably too good for that team, which kind of at that time. And I think in the Championship, if we would have been able to convince him to stick around, I think he could have done things in the Championship.
You put him as a 10 in the Championship, and he'd have caused problems. His goal against Sunderland from that Adama Traore cross, when we lost 3-1 away, quality. Another player, not even for consideration, though he probably joined us a year too late, probably would have been better off in the Championship for us, and definitely liked playing against us. Hotter, he made one beautiful assist for Wesley against Everton. We thought, okay, we could be on something here, and he never did it, did he? It's a shame, because he was a good player, but I think the Championship was definitely his level.
Yeah, his best contribution for Villa was getting nutted by Danny Drinkwater. So any hope of signing, or any idea of signing Danny Drinkwater, died at that moment.
It's the fact that Danny Drinkwater went on Google Translate and said, "I'm sorry" in Spanish to him. I find that quite funny, but yeah.
So we didn't really touch upon that when we were talking about centre midfielders, because funny enough we were talking about decent centre midfielders, but in terms of, as a sneak preview perhaps for the worst 11, Danny Drinkwater is one of the worst players I've ever seen at Villa.
Oh, but he's a lone player.
So he wouldn't get in that team, but he'd get I suppose, a dishonourable mention in terms of that. Speaking of lone players who deserve an honourable mention, Robert Snodgrass. I think he did a job in that season whereby we lost in the playoff final. He was, talking about Championship players, exactly what you needed. Bit of skill, absolute shithouse. knew how to win a free kick, probably better than anybody I can remember seeing in recent times. Really played well for us in that season. We had a lot of players who scored quite a lot of goals, which is funny enough. One of the criticisms of Bruce by the end was just really defensive team. Yeah. In terms of Doma, he had his best season in terms of goal scoring. Mentioned Josh Onomah. Like, you look at that now, you're like, I mean, I was watching Villa obviously that season. Like, really? He scored that many goals? Because he's just done absolutely nothing, kind of really career-wise since then. But yeah, Snodgrass is kind of one of those, of a type player. So I think he deserves an honourable mention, even though he can't qualify for the team.
The thing you mentioned in Snodgrass, though, and you rightly point out that he played on the right wing and Adoma played really well, you sort of shoot yourself in the foot, because Adoma then transitioned over to the left, didn't he? But Snodgrass, I remember the announcement video, because it was a picture of Villa Park, and there was Snodgrass on the far screen. You really had to zoom in to see it. It was around that time of those ridiculously dramatic announcement videos or pictures, one in which Southampton got like the military corps in to announce that Alex McCarthy had signed a new contract. Like, it was an amazing video anyway. Snodgrass, great player, shithouse like you say, but he was a player who came to the club and he respected the club. He knew what it meant to play for us. He built up a great connection with the fans. There's a Snodgrass playing on the right. He's got a lovely left foot, but his right foot's fucking shite, type of thing. And that goal he scored against Sheffield United in the last minute at Bramall Lane.
Yep.
And I think we were very disappointed that we didn't sign him the following season.
Yeah.
But such is life, and he's ruined it all by going and joining West Brom.
Yeah, a shame really. I'm guessing that would have disqualified him from consideration for your team, even if he had played permanently. So we counted Bacuna as right midfield.
Well, we mentioned him at right back, didn't we? You can count him, but no. What did he do at right midfield? He scored the free kick against Man City, maybe. His best contributions came as a right back, crossing the ball for Benteke, didn't they, really?
Basically,
before he got his 250 million move to Real Madrid and won 10 Champions Leagues in half a month.
Yep, 6 World Cups. It was a busy summer.
Mate, and Tiddlywinks Championship.
That is the hardest one to win, I'd probably say.
The OB.
Man, what a Hall of Fame career.
We can say a Hall of Fame.
Well, you know, that's the alternative, you know, kind of if things go wrong. And I suppose, speaking of Hall of Fame, we got Alexander Tonev. So,
left midfielder.
Well, you know, I mean, in terms of shifting through that wreckage of how many players either actually did play right midfield who haven't been disqualified by me or by you, I suppose in terms of, I'm going to probably, you know, maybe spoiler alert in terms of what's coming up when we play left midfield. I would put El Ghazi as right midfield. He's got no chance of getting in a left midfield, I don't think, in terms of who we got next. Also in terms of probably looking at the list, our best right midfielder was in the last decade who might potentially qualify, doesn't qualify because he was on loan. That kind of leaves me with El Ghazi, really.
El Ghazi scores big goals for us. I don't think Adoma's a bad shout, to be fair, but I'd pick Traore for what he's done so far. I think he's one of those players. He's a bit of a maverick, you know. He comes into the team. He's got his skills. All right, he isn't the most consistent all of the time, but he's shown that he's a player who can score big goals in big games for us. But let's be completely honest, I don't think whoever we pick in this decade is going to get into it when you've got Stephen Cook to contend with.
To be fair, who can contend with Stephen Cook? I mean, you know, they don't call him the chef at nothing, you know, because he is always cooking something up. We have had often for votes a decade where we've had 2. So we could have Traore and El Ghazi just to round it up to the 4, I think, because realistically for the other decades we've only got 1. Okay. So I think that leaves us with a final foursome: Ray Houghton, James Milner, El Ghazi, Traore, not Adama. Who is your pick for the right midfield spot in your Ultimate 11?
Well, I imagine that he'll be listening to this podcast while he's having one of his rich tea biscuits and a nice cup of Yorkshire tea. For me, it's got to be James Milner. James Milner, fantastic player. You'd even have him back now. He probably wouldn't, again, not with a lot of midfielders, probably wouldn't walk straight into the first team. He'd be very much the same as he is at Liverpool, but he'd still offer something at the grand old age of 35. For me, it's got to be James Milner.
Say no Milner, he'll probably still be offering something at a grand old age of 45.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And still been tucked up in bed at 8 o'clock. I mean, realistically, in terms of right midfield, for me, there's only 2 choices, or 2 players who could be in that choice: Ray Houghton, James Milner. I think in terms of, funnily enough, going slightly against, I suppose, kind of the ethos, I think the versatility of Milner gets him in my team.
Yeah.
Even though I think there is, you know, legitimate arguments for centre midfield over right midfield. Houghton probably played more games on right midfield if you're not counting the loan spell, definitely, but otherwise a bit close. He's kind of 2 full seasons, then he was out the door, you know, kind of March 95, a real kind of short spell in the grand scheme of things. Obviously made a big impact, as we touched upon. So I think he, you know, kind of the most honourable of mentions for Ray Houghton, but I'll be agreeing with you, and I'm going to put Milner in my right midfield spot in my Ultimate 11.
My days. We won't agree on anything when we do the unultimate 11. But yeah, there we have it. James Milner, another player that we agree on. So out of all the positions that we put in so far, which is 8, that's 7 that we've agreed on. That's not bad considering. And let's be honest, I mean, we've been Villa fans for a long time. We've gone to matches together. We've had lots of conversations about the Villa, and we don't always have the same opinion.
No.
And we're not afraid to mention when the other one's wrong, like you are about Ulysses de la Cruz. But to think that we've got 7 so far is pretty good. I do think though that left-hand side may throw up a couple of questions for us both. It's another one. You look at, without going into the left midfield role at the moment because it's another podcast, but just to tease the people at home, we have got quite the abundance of choice for left midfield, and then strikers as well. We've had some great strikers over the years at the Villa.
They are going to be cracking episodes. In terms of the left midfield, we've got loads of great players to talk about. It's a rare one for me in terms of I already know who I'm picking without even needing to do any research. I know who's going in. But real abundance of quality in that left midfield. And the strikers as well. I mean, that's going to be... Even though we haven't had that many strikers who actually scored what you may call a lot of goals in terms of a season, we've had a lot of, players really upholding the, more the Villa tradition of a centre-forward, getting stuck in there, really leading the line, which is what the fans like to see. So I think we've got the final 2 episodes of the Ultimate 11. I think they're going to be really cracking ones if we do say so ourselves.
I'll be honest with you, I can't believe Danny Ings has gone in after 5 games.
Man, I mean, he gets everywhere, on the pitch and in our team.
I mean, on left midfield as well. He's never even played there.
Well, if he keeps assisting the way he has been, then, we could put him a left back, kind of have to redo the votes.
So our team so far, looking quite strong. And you think, don't worry about those 3 yet. Your shoe-in for left midfield may very well be the same as mine, may not be. I think there's an argument for at least 2 players. I'm sure there'll be a few more when we do properly research it on our lunch breaks at work and taking the strikers out of it. But so far then, we've got Mark Bosnich as our goalkeeper. We've got Mark Delaney, Olaf Melberg, Paul God-McGrath and Steve Staunton. That makes up our back 5, if you like. And then we now know that we've got James Milner joining Ian Taylor and Gareth Barry. And I think it's quite nice to see that there's a mixture of newer players within that team, really. I know they're not brand new players, but Barry, Milner and Melberg are obviously later on towards the last 15 years. When you look at those other ones who were more the first 15 years for us, really, maybe Mark Delaney was as well, really.
I suppose looking at what's happened in the last 10 years perhaps might be unsurprising. But the last 10 years is the only decade in our team which isn't represented yet in the Ultimate 11. The fans put Martinez in goal, so they have their selection. So it'll be interesting to see with our remaining selections whether that balance is redressed.
I suppose, though, if we were to do the, 40 years, when it's 40 years in the Premier League, how many of those players from this decade would actually be in more consideration? And you look at the likes of Martinez, who you've just mentioned there. Tyrone Mings got an honourable mention. He got into the last 4, as did John McGinn. Maybe we see the likes of Leon Bailey, Ollie Watkins. Who knows? Akani Chukwuemeka could even be knocking down the door at that point. We'll have to think of a different formation, probably.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how advanced football tactics will be, in our 4th decade. But obviously not as advanced or ahead of the competition as this podcast. We'll be putting up the right midfield discussion as a separate podcast on the Spotify page, as we have been for all the other Ultimate 11 discussions that we've had. We may put them on any other podcast providers if they let us on. But yeah, another spot down. Looking forward to the next few and see where we get to with the Ultimate 11. Moving on then, back from the past into the present, technically into the future, because next up we'll be previewing Saturday's game away at Man United, Old Trafford. Was going to be 3 o'clock, been moved forward to 12:30, because there's a Courtineers concert on later on in the day and some other shenanigans perhaps, so the police have asked for that to be moved forward. So if you do have a ticket for the game and you weren't aware, don't turn up at 3 o'clock because the game's going to be over. So hopefully the fans are going to be there on time. Do you think the team is going to be there metaphorically on time in terms of their performance on the field? What are you thinking are going to be the storylines? How do you see us setting up? How do you see United setting up? Or what are your feelings ahead of this one?
I think the big question mark is obviously going to be over Leon Bailey. Is he fit enough to play? And if he is, does he start? Matty Targett looked as though he may have had a knock, potentially. You mentioned Matty Cash has potentially got a knock as well. So we know that Bailey has, because of how ferociously he hit that third goal against Everton. And he said, yeah, I think I might have injured myself when I scored. Yeah, mate, you're a legend already. John McGinn, I don't think we're going to see for a couple of weeks now. And rightly so, if it is the concussion injury that they're saying that they believe he's got. So surprises, I think the biggest surprise for me really will be if Bailey starts. Because I don't really see it happening as much as I want it to happen. That would be the big one. And if he does start, does he start left wing back? Or do they put him behind the strikers and say, do you know what, when you get the ball, just bloody run at them, and Ings and Watkins will move off you? We know that Twanzebe is not available, so likely to have Courtney House in there. But is it 3-5-2 again for you?
I think, obviously, the injuries, or if they're not injured, that is going to be the determining factor. But on the proviso, we've got enough players to play in the positions we want them to play in. I think we're not changing the system from Saturday. I think we're playing 3-5-2, 5-3-2. I'm looking at it again, just because we've looked comfortable playing it, and you can see the familiarity is only going to increase the more times you play it. And we played it away at Chelsea, a big test, played well, just a couple of stupid mistakes, lost us the game. Everton were able to deal with Everton's kind of sitting back, and then the pressure they had, and just a spurt was enough to finish them off. But mention Bailey, I'd be surprised if he plays as well or starts, especially in that left wing back role where Targett plays. I just don't think that Smith is going to throw him in for his first start away at Old Trafford when Man United have got that attacking threat that they've got, with their front four. So I think it's 3-5-2. I think we're looking, for try and keep it solid again, similar to how we set up against Chelsea. Although obviously I agree with you, McGinn I don't think is playing. I mean, we didn't touch upon it too much when we were talking about Everton. It really should have been taken off earlier, frankly. I mean, in terms of, I think there was Dean Smith saying, we're listening to the player. It's in those situations, it's precisely what you're not meant to do, kind of under the current protocols. You have your medical staff on to assess, and if you don't pass the tests, you don't pass the tests. You don't listen to the player really in that scenario, which is unfortunate from a a quality perspective, because he's one of our best players and you want to see him on the field. But if you can't see, then he's kind of no good for anybody. But yeah, I think it's going to be a team set out to contain. Hopefully we've got attacking outlets in there. I can see Bailey coming off the bench, partly because of fitness and partly because, in terms of that last half hour kind of sprint, he can bring something different to a game, especially if it's tight at that stage. Even if it's a draw, we might be winning, or it might be even 1-0 to United, or could still nick a goal. So I think it's going to be a game whereby we're not going to go in fear, in terms of, I don't think we're putting it from behind the ball. I don't think we're kind of set up for that. Chelsea blueprint, I think, is the one we're going to follow. Hopefully Ings and Watkins are a bit closer to being on the same wavelength. Ramsey, I think it's going to play, just because, kind of that terrier kind of mentality. I think you need to try and put some pressure on this United team, because I think looking at United, Ronaldo, Greenwood, Fernandes, Sancho, that front four is, pretty dangerous to say the least. But, Pogba perhaps, but, kind of that, it's not a soft underbelly, but, kind of, if it's Fred and McTominay, for example, or kind of one of them two.
Yeah.
That's where we got to get the ball kind of in those areas, really kind of go and attack them. And I think in terms of, us playing kind of, probably you think Nakamba's going to play, especially McKinn doesn't play, Luis is going to play, Ramsey. I think that midfield battle is going to be really the key outcome to the game, really, because I think if we can get at them, in terms of United, Old Trafford isn't known for being, kind of the cauldron of atmosphere, intimidation for an away team. I mean, under Fergie, you didn't need the crowd to do anything, because just the quality of that United team meant most teams are kind of given up before they even started. That's kind of gone, because United over the last 10 years, it feels like 10 decades. But you're looking in terms of, obviously, Solskjaer as a manager, you're not looking at him, to be honest, thinking he's the master tactician. I mean, it's not quite as bad as, when, throwing in another one of my loves, The Simpsons, throwing in the Simpsons reference when Homer becomes the head of the union at the power plant, negotiates the dental plan and then runs around the floor on a circle when he has to step down. I don't think Solskjaer is that bad. But, there is a feeling with United that obviously Solskjaer isn't a terrible manager. But he's not a great manager, I don't think. And, in terms of, it wasn't quite as stark as it is for Chelsea. We talked about it last week. Lampard, Tuchel, real massive difference in that quality.
Yeah.
Whoever United could get in above Solskjaer, I don't think the difference is that stark, because I think Solskjaer, I'd probably say he's the best manager than Lampard, to be honest. But it would be interesting to see, especially if I was a United fan. As a Villa fan, I don't really care too much about seeing this, to be honest. But if you had, one of those top echelon managers in charge of this United team, you would put them a lot closer to winning the title than you are under Solskjaer, I think. So, in terms of, for Dean Smith, I think there'll be an element of fancying his chances, in a tactical battle, in terms against Solskjaer, because, in terms of United front four, you're not going to out-quality them. And I think in terms of their defence, it's not bad, actually. I think in terms of, obviously, Luke Shaw in the last year, has obviously really become the player that we thought he would be at Southampton. I remember seeing him play for Southampton at Villa Park once, and you don't often get too impressed by left-backs, but I thought it was brilliant kind of when I saw him playing. It's like he's really going to do something. And, had a horror injury, but, seems to have recovered over that, which is great for England. Varane, great signing, I think, for United, to be fair. Maguire, solid. I mean, Wan-Bissaka got himself sent off, so, defensively he's solid. You've got Dalot who can come in and play right midfield. So it's solid, in terms of that defence. I mean, De Gea, decent, or Henderson if they play. So, decent. So I don't think there's an obvious weakness in that defence where you think can go target maybe right back. I think maybe Target can go and target a right back. But, in terms of, it's not going to be a game whereby United are going to give anything away. But it's not going to be a game. If you can get at them, you're going to have to earn it at United. In terms of last season, completely different set of teams. Should have got something at Old Trafford, I think, last season. I think it was Keenan Davis missed from about 3 yards out, kind of in injury time. Should have got something out of the game. I thought, for a large part of that game, we were a better team. So I think the fact also the kickoff's been moved to 12:30 helps us, because of, the atmosphere can sometimes be a bit down for an early start, and obviously it's at United, and we talked about their atmosphere isn't the greatest anyway. So I'd go there with confidence, thinking, if we have to impose our game at Old Trafford, I think. And depending on who's fit, I mean, Friday afternoon, this might have all gone to the proverbial when Dean Smith's press conference has got like 8 players out injured. But I think, in terms of it, even in our first season in Premier League, we got a draw. Old Trafford, I mean, we had, again, slightly different players there. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's a game whereby we've probably won like 2 times at Old Trafford, maybe, if that. But, for such a terrible record, I'm not going there thinking, oh, God, we've got to get rolled over here. But if United get on a roll early, attacking, if we do what we did against Chelsea early on in terms of stupid mistakes, yeah, it's going to be a difficult afternoon. But Newcastle managed to score there, and they're terrible. So, I'm not thinking it's going to be, kind of a real kind of one-sided battering.
So, you look at the Man United team, and if they can put their strongest players out in each position in their 4-2-3-1, they've got one of the best teams on paper, top 4 easily, if not potentially the best team on paper, arguably. He's going to go 3-5-2, or you hope he does. You mentioned Nakamba starting over McGinn, which I don't see anybody else starting over McGinn when he's injured. It means that Luiz can get forward. It means that JJ can get forward and Nakamba can do that brushing up role. I think the 3-5-2 potentially works in our favour against them, in the fact that Ronaldo's up front, so you get one of Konsa, Hawes or Mings to mark him. Hawes, quite a bit slow. Mings is a bit faster and so is Konsa, but Hawes is very good in the air, as is Ronaldo. We know that, So you get one of them marking him. And then you've got Bruno Fernandes, who's the real player who makes them tick, really. You put Nakamba on him and you say, just stick to him. Stick to him, stick close, put the boot in when you need to, get the ball away from him, give him a little niggle. 2 of their players are marked straight away. Your 2 centre-backs then, your other centre-backs, are left to mark their centre midfielders who are going to push on. Pogba may try and push on a bit. He won't do too much. He likes to play a little bit deeper, get the ball and lay it around. He'll be alongside Matic, McTominay or Fred. They're not going to push. They're going to sit back. So it leaves one sort of those 3 centre-backs to sort of sweep if they need to, or even push up and help Nakamba a little bit. And I imagine that'd be Mings more than either of the others. They're 2 wingers. I don't know who they've been playing. Greenwood's been out wide. Sancho doesn't play all of the time. Lingard can come in onto the wing also. Rashford's obviously injured. But Cash and Young, for me, should have enough to keep getting forward and back. Cash will play the whole game as long as he's not injured. Young, maybe not. We see that change for Bailey. The 2 centre midfielders for us, JJ and Luiz, will have more licence to get forward because of the marking job that those 6 other players that we've just said. So if they can push forward and Fred balls through for Ings and Watkins, then it means that we've pretty much got 4 attacking against 5, if you count Matic sitting a little bit deeper. I think Ings drops back into the 10 a bit more because that's what he likes to do and allow Watkins to push on. Going back to what we were talking about when we were discussing Everton, Watkins, for me, is the type of player who will get into the 6-yard box. He will get headers in on goal like he did against Brentford. Will get his shots off like he did against Brentford, and he'll be busy anywhere from 12 yards to the goal line. Ings, for me, I think he gets the ball on the edge of that box, he'll have a pop. He's clever enough too. He's a bit like a Harry Kane, Alan Shearer, in the fact that he can score any type of goal. He's not just a person who you need to get into the penalty box to convert low crosses or crosses that come in. With them having arguably the signing of the season in Rafael Varane, and I think he'll be as important to them as Ruben Dias is to Man City, that throws up, difficulties for the striker. Harry Maguire's no slouch, is he? He's a decent defender. Might not be worth 75 million, but he's the captain. I know he isn't the captain of England, but he's captain of Man United. Big player for England. He's a good defender. Him and Watkins will be a good battle. Ings versus Varane will. I think this could potentially be won. If we do it right, or whether they do it right, it will be won by the midfielders who overload the box to help support the strikers. And we've just got to hope that JJ or Dougie can get forward. Maybe Buendia starts, or Traore, just for that bit of magic, and they have a bit more of a free roll, and they decide not to play Nakamba, though it seems like the sort of game that's made for marvellous.
Yeah, and hopefully it will be a marvellous result for us. So it's not the first time we've done that, won't be the last. I think, I agree with you. It's going to be a real interesting tactical battle, which I think is going to be won and lost in one or two key moments. There's going to be, as you mentioned, we're not going to get much change out of Varane and Maguire. So if we get a chance, we're going to have to be putting it away, hoping it falls in the right place for Danny Ings. Yeah. Or potentially, a little screamer from one of the overlapping midfielders coming in. So it's coming down to those fine margins. Which way do you think it's going to go? Do you think we're going to get a result?
Oh, it's a tough one, because you can see Ronaldo having a great game and being the one person to bag a few past Martinez, which I don't think many people will do, because of how good a goalkeeper Martinez is. De Gea, he's very much on form at the moment. He seems to have rediscovered that a bit. Maybe it's because he's actually got a good defence in front of him now.
Always helps.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I see United potentially taking an early lead, first 6-10 minutes, around that mark. I can then see us scoring and taking it 1-1 at half time. And then it's either going to be 2-2 or 2-1 United. And I obviously favour the 2-2 scoreline. I think United score towards the end, within the last 10 or 15 minutes. If it's too early towards the end, if it's 75th minute or before the 80th, before the 82nd even, then we're going to be hanging on by the skin of our teeth at the end. It could be an 88th minute goal for them. I can see us getting two. And I think if you're only going to get one or two chances, who better than Danny Ings to have in your team and to hope that those chances fall to? We saw against Chelsea, Watkins was coming back from injury. He had a number of chances and couldn't convert them. Ings is a better finisher. So I'm going to go for 2-1. 2-2. United will get a penalty, won't they, because of Mike Dean, and they haven't had one all season. So, of course, we're the team that rolls into town and says, of course, have one against us. Yep. Who else hasn't scored for a while? Oh, your groundkeeper's never scored. Yeah, of course he can. Danny Ings scores for us. 2-2. Danny Ings scores for us. You?
I think, to be honest, I largely agree with what you said in terms of, I think both teams will score. I think United are getting a dodgy penalty somewhere. And
Bruno or a Dougie foul on Pogba?
Or Matt Cash, maybe, kind of doing something. I mean, we got a few candidates, and as you said, Mike Dean doesn't need too much encouragement to give a penalty away. So I can see it in terms of the way you said it panning out. United taking the lead, us equalising, United getting a late goal. Just because in terms of you gone for 2-2, I'd go for 2-1 United. But I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be, I know it's not on the telly on legitimate channels, but I think it will be another game where people who haven't really watched Villa too much will go, oh God, these are actually decent, in terms of thinking, oh, they haven't been rolled over, by Ronaldo scoring a hat-trick just because he's Ronaldo and he should be allowed to score every game, although he's doing a pretty good job of that in terms of his return for United. But yeah, I think it's going to be a close game, I'd probably say United would nick it. But, you know, in terms of another progressive performance, I would hope to see. And, you know, in terms of spoiler alert, I think it'll put us in a good spot, hopefully, to get a result the following week in another away game, which I anticipate, you know, will be another tight game, but I think we can get something there. Well, we'll see if I still think that, you know, when we're doing the preview next week. But tight game, low. I don't think it's going to be a United rollover, which, you know, I think we've been to United a few times and just got done over, and, you know, kind of not really had much hope. But yeah, I think if it's 2-2, I wouldn't be surprised, you know, in terms of, you know, the way it pans out. United will probably nick it, I think. But another, you know, a good test for us, especially if we've got a few injuries, to see how deep this squad is. And I think, you know, as we touched upon during the course of the podcast, we're in a decent position squad-wise. So, yeah, I think we'll give them a game. And as you said, considering most people have gotten top 4, you know, I think it's a decent barometer for progress.
Definitely. I think, you know, it comes to something, and I'm going to go to a famous Villa quote in a minute from a very famous manager of ours, but it comes to something that last season, when we had our strongest team available, with Grealish, especially with Grealish, you felt that we could take anybody on and get a result against anybody, really. You know, you didn't fear going to play Man City. Whilst you may not have been 100% confident that we'd get a result, you were confident that we could get one because of him a lot of the time, and the way he played and the way he made other people play around him. We don't have him anymore, and we've got other players. Hopefully we're not seen as the Leon Bailey team after his glorious 21 minutes. I think we can start being seen as more of an Aston Villa team. It's very much gone back to that sort of O'Neill era when it was Aston Villa as a team. It was never the Gareth Barry team, the James Milner team, the Gabby Agbonlahor team in those days. It's look at that team. And going on to a great manager that we had, and thinking about what he said, Ron Saunders, do you want to bet against us? I don't think many people would bet against us being able to get something out of the game. And it's testament to the recruitment that we've done. The fact that we got rid of Grealish, this player who was the greatest player in the world when he wore claret and blue, and was the reason we did as well as we did because of his low socks and his shin pads and everything else that he could bring to the team. He was our talisman. We don't have him. We brought these other players in. Christian Perslow came out and said we brought these 3 in to make up for him. 16 goal contributions in 2/3 of a season from him last season. 7 in 5 games from the players that have come in. Now, I appreciate Danny Ings set up Leon Bailey for one of them, and Bailey set up, Ings also set up Buendia. But it's still good numbers at the moment when you're trying to replace someone. So why can't we go to these places? Why can't we cause an upset? When we had O'Neill as coach, I remember Ferguson one year said, I'm not worried about Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea. Aston Villa are the team that are the dark horse for me. I think they'll challenge. We finished 6th that season. We beat them 1-0 away. When Gabby scored the header. Why can't we be a dark horse again, or a team that the top 6 go, or the Sky 6 say, oh God, not them this week. Anybody but them.
Yeah, and we've certainly been able to do that to Everton, you know, in terms of hopefully we can have another...
Rolled them over.
Yeah, you know, in terms of when you were saying a classic manager quote, I thought you were going to whack out Remy Gard. So, you know, kind of, we managed to reach to a slightly higher level. And speaking of reaching to a slightly higher level, you have been listening to the highest level of Villa podcast quality, because that brings us to the end of our current instalment of Talk of the Trinity, with previewed United just now. We've talked about Everton, we've previewed Chelsea, and we've put another player on the chalkboard of our Ultimate 11. So lots gone on. You know, if you want to be keeping up to date with what's going on with all things Villa, check out the Twitter page at Talk Trinity. Check us out on Spotify for the Ultimate 11 and all the podcasts for the last couple of weeks we've uploaded. Check out our YouTube page, whereby if you just go to the Talk Trinity page on YouTube, you've got all our podcasts that we've put out throughout the course of this season. And we're still waiting for Tim Cook to get back to us as regards Apple. Come on, Tim, sort it out. So, plenty of other ways, more ways we're going to find to get all things Villa to you. In terms of the main podcast, we'll be back next week. We've already got, some great plans lined up for International Week, and, we're working on, for the season upcoming. Plenty to get through, and, hopefully you'll be here with us all the way, and hopefully Villa will be all the way back from Manchester on Saturday with a decent result. So this has been Talk of the Trinity. Cheers for listening. Up the Villa.
Cheers. So thank you very much. Up the Villa.